In 1965, grandmother revealed 30 secret desserts. Nobody knew she'd kept them hidden in a faded recipe box for decades. No fancy equipment, just flour, butter, sugar, and recipes. Her pound cake represented 4 generations. Church cookies won every bake sale. Then she passed away, and the recipes started vanishing with her. Number 4 stayed moist all week, while store-bought cakes turned hard in 2 days. Let me show you the 30 desserts that used to be mandatory at every family gathering, but nobody makes anymore. 7UP pound cake was the secret recipe she revealed only at family reunions when everyone requested it one more time. 1 cup of 7UP soda replaced milk and baking powder. The carbonation made the cake rise without any chemical leaveners. Butter and shortening creamed together with sugar until fluffy. 6 eggs went in one at a time. Flour folded through. The 7UP poured in last. The batter looked too thin, but it wasn't. The cake is baked for an hour and a half in a tube pan. It came out golden with a tight crumb that stayed moist for days. The flavor tasted like butter and vanilla with a hint of lemon from the soda. She sliced it thin and served it plain because it didn't need frosting. The recipe stayed written on a faded index card with notes in her handwriting. The cake disappeared when boxed mixes became easier and nobody wanted to cream butter by hand anymore. Convenience replaced the care she put into every slice. Old-fashioned peanut butter cookies was the only recipe grandmother ever wrote down when her daughter got married in 1942. Creamy peanut butter, creamed with butter and both white and brown sugar. 1 egg beaten through. Flour mixed with baking soda and salt sifted in gradually. The dough came together stiff and slightly crumbly. She rolled tablespoon-sized balls between her palms. Each ball pressed flat, with a fork creating the crosshatch pattern everyone recognized. The cookies baked until the edges turned golden, but the centers stayed soft. They finished cooking on the sheet after coming out of the oven. The peanut butter flavor came through pure and strong. No chocolate chips, no fancy additions. Just peanut butter cookies the way they were meant to taste. The recipe card yellowed with age, but the measurements never changed. These cookies disappeared when store-bought became easier and the fork pattern seemed old-fashioned instead of classic. Southern pound cake was the heirloom recipe she shared only on her deathbed, adding 1 secret ingredient nobody else knew about. 1 pound of butter, 1 pound of sugar, 1 pound of eggs, 1 pound of flour, the traditional formula everyone claimed to know. But she added a capful of almond extract alongside the vanilla. That small change made her cake different from every other pound cake at church. The butter and sugar creamed for 10 minutes until white and fluffy. 10 eggs went in one at a time, beating well after each addition. The flour folded through by hand. The batter filled a tube pan greased and floured perfectly. It baked slow and low for over an hour. The crust crackled when it cooled. The inside stayed dense and buttery. Her pound cake tasted better on day 3 than day 1. Southern pound cake disappeared when the effort of creaming butter for 10 minutes felt unreasonable. Stand mixers helped, but patience disappeared faster.
Before we move on, many of you asked in the comments where to find these recipes. We even received tons of email too, so we published these recipes on our website. The link is in the description. Let's continue.
Hummingbird cake was the tropical family secret she perfected years before the magazine ever printed a version. Mashed bananas and crushed pineapple mixed with oil instead of butter. The fruit kept everything moist. Flour, sugar, cinnamon, and baking soda stirred together. 3 eggs beaten through. Chopped pecans and shredded coconut folded in last. The batter divided between 3 round pans. It baked until a toothpick came out clean. The layers cooled completely before assembly. Cream cheese frosting spread thick between each layer and across the top. More pecans pressed into the sides for decoration. The cake tasted better the second day after the flavors settled together. Her handwritten recipe had better than Sister Eleanor's penciled in the margin. Nobody knew what the rivalry was about, but everyone knew whose cake won. Hummingbird cake disappeared when layer cakes required too much effort. Sheet cakes and cupcakes became the easier choice for family gatherings. Texas sheet cake was the massive chocolate dessert she baked in a jelly roll pan whenever the church needed to feed everyone at once. Butter and cocoa boiled together with water. The hot mixture poured into dry ingredients. Buttermilk and eggs whisked through. Baking soda and vanilla went in last. The thin batter spread across the entire pan. It baked for 20 minutes until the center barely set. The fudge icing started while the cake still sat hot in the oven. More butter and cocoa boiled with milk. Powdered sugar stirred in off the heat. The hot icing poured over the hot cake. It soaked into every crack. Chopped pecans scattered on top before the icing set. The cake stayed moist for days because of that soaked-in frosting. One pan fed 30 people. She cut it into perfect squares. Texas sheet cake disappeared when individual desserts became more popular than feeding the whole congregation. Sheet cakes felt too communal for modern gatherings. 5 secret desserts revealed. The 7-OP pound cake she only made for reunions. Peanut butter cookies written down only once in 1942. Southern pound cake with her deathbed secret. Hummingbird cake better than Sister Eleanor's Texas sheet cake that fed 30 people from one pan. 25 more family treasures ahead. Keep watching. Chocolate Lush was the 4-layer Baptist potluck legend that caused near fainting when people took their first bite. Pecans ground fine mixed with flour, butter, and a little sugar. The mixture pressed into a 9 by 13 pan and baked until golden. Cream cheese beat with powdered sugar and half of the Cool Whip spread over the cooled crust. Chocolate pudding made from scratch, not instant, mixed with cold milk until thick. The pudding layer spread over the cream cheese. The remaining Cool Whip topped everything. Chocolate shavings from a Hershey bar scattered across the white topping. The whole thing chilled overnight before serving. Each layer stayed distinct when cut. The pecan crust crunched. The cream cheese layer balanced the sweetness. The chocolate pudding tasted rich and real. Chocolate Lush disappeared when making pudding from scratch felt like too much work. Instant pudding changed the texture. The church ladies who made it right stopped coming to potlucks. Gran's apple cake was the spiced treasure she brought over warm from the oven, making the whole house smell like autumn. Fresh apples peeled and chopped into small pieces. Cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves mixed with flour and baking soda. Vegetable oil beat with eggs and both white and brown sugar. The dry ingredients stirred into the wet mixture. The chopped apples folded through, along with chopped pecans. The thick batter spread into a greased 9 by 13 pan. It baked for almost an hour, filling the kitchen with spice. Cream cheese frosting spread over the warm cake, so it soaked in slightly. The cake stayed incredibly moist because of the apples. It tasted like apple pie and spice cake combined. Each bite had apple pieces and pecans throughout. Gran's apple cake disappeared when boxed spice cakes seemed easier. Fresh apples felt like too much prep work. The cream cheese frosting became the only thing people remembered about the original. Buttermilk pie was the Methodist Church mystery that transformed tangy buttermilk into something magical when every Southern church claimed the authentic version. Eggs beaten with sugar until thick and pale. Melted butter cooled slightly before whisking in. Buttermilk added next, along with a splash of vanilla. Flour stirred through just until combined. The mixture poured into an unbaked pie shell. It baked low and slow for almost an hour. The top developed a thin, crackling crust like crème brûlée. The center stayed creamy and custard-like. Some versions added lemon zest. Others added a splash of bourbon. Her version stayed simple, with just vanilla and a grating of fresh nutmeg on top. The acidity of the buttermilk balanced the sweetness perfectly. Buttermilk pie disappeared when buttermilk stopped being a refrigerator staple. Making buttermilk from milk and vinegar never tasted the same. The real stuff made the difference everyone could taste, but nobody could explain. Carrot cake was the great-grandmother recipe that dated back generations, including the secret combination of pineapple and coconut with the carrots. Grated carrots measured by the cup. Crushed pineapple drained, but the juice saved for the frosting. Shredded coconut and chopped pecans set aside. Flour mixed with baking soda, cinnamon, and salt. Vegetable oil beat with eggs and sugar. The dry ingredients stirred in. Carrots, pineapple, coconut, and pecans folded through last. The batter divided between 2 round pans. It baked until a toothpick came out clean. Cream cheese frosting made with butter, cream cheese, powdered sugar, vanilla, and a splash of that saved pineapple juice. The frosting spread thick between the layers and over the top. The cake stayed moist for days. The texture stayed tender, not dense. Carrot cake disappeared when buying it from bakeries became normal. The homemade version with real pineapple and fresh coconut got replaced with versions that tasted close but never quite right. Watergate salad was the bizarre green fluffy dessert that showed up at every church potluck throughout the 1970s despite making no culinary sense. Pistachio pudding mix straight from the box. Crushed pineapple with all its juice. Miniature marshmallows by the handful. Cool Whip folded through everything. Some versions added chopped pecans for crunch. The mixture turned bright green from the pudding. It chilled for at least 2 hours before serving. The marshmallows softened slightly. The pineapple juice thinned the pudding just enough. The pistachios added subtle flavor and that distinct color everyone recognized immediately. Mothers insisted it counted as a side dish because it contained fruit. Children knew better and headed straight for it at the dessert table. Watergate salad disappeared when Cool Whip became uncool and artificial colors became suspicious. The name connection to the political scandal didn't help. Younger generations refused to understand why anyone mixed pudding with pineapple and called it salad. 10 secret family desserts revealed. 7-Up pound cake requested at every reunion. Texas sheet cake that fed the whole congregation. Peanut butter cookies written down only once. Buttermilk pie with its crackling top. Watergate salad that made no sense but tasted perfect. 20 more heirloom treasures ahead. Stay watching. 7-layer cookies were the engineering marvel of church bake sales where Mrs. Abernathy cut hers into perfect diamond shapes instead of boring squares. Graham crackers crushed fine mixed with melted butter pressed firmly into the bottom of a 9 by 13 pan. The crust baked for 10 minutes to set. Sweetened condensed milk poured over the warm crust covering every inch. Semi-sweet chocolate chips scattered across the sticky surface in an even layer. Butterscotch chips went on next, creating a second chip layer. Sweetened flaked coconut spread over the chips. Chopped pecans or walnuts finished the layers on top. The whole pan baked for 25 minutes until the edges turned golden and the center bubbled. The hardest part was waiting for it to cool completely before cutting. Mrs. Abernathy's secret was refrigerating the pan overnight before slicing. Cold bars cut clean without falling apart. Room temperature bars turned into a gooey mess. Each bite delivered all 7 layers at once. The graham crust provided structure. The condensed milk held everything together like edible glue. The chocolate and butterscotch melted slightly. The coconut added chew. The nuts provided crunch. 7-layer cookies represented efficient dessert architecture where every ingredient had a purpose and a place. They disappeared when making them from scratch seemed unnecessary. Store-bought versions never stacked the layers right. The coconut-to-chip ratio always felt off. The condensed milk layers stayed too thin. Homemade 7-layer cookies became a memory instead of a regular treat at bake sales and potlucks. Strawberry pretzel jello salad was the 3-layer engineering masterpiece that sparked theological debates about whether it belonged on the dessert table or the salad table at church picnic. Pretzels crushed but not pulverized, mixed with melted butter and 3 tablespoons of sugar. The mixture pressed into a 9 by 13 pan and baked for 10 minutes until it smelled toasty. The crust cooled completely before the next layer went on. Cream cheese beat until fluffy with powdered sugar. Cool Whip folded through, creating a white fluffy cloud. This layer spread carefully over the pretzel crust, creating a moisture barrier that kept the bottom crunchy. The cream cheese layer chilled for 30 minutes to set firm. Strawberry jello dissolved in boiling water, then mixed with frozen strawberries. The mixture cooled to room temperature before pouring over the cream cheese layer. If the jello went on hot, it melted the cream cheese. If it went on too cold, it didn't spread smooth. The timing had to be perfect. The whole thing chilled for at least 4 hours until the jello set firm and jiggly. When cut, each piece showed 3 distinct layers. The pretzel bottom stayed remarkably crisp even hours later. The cream cheese middle tasted tangy and rich. The strawberry top provided fruity sweetness. Sweet met salty in every bite. Crunchy contrasted with creamy. Strawberry pretzel jello salad disappeared when jello became uncool, and labor-intensive layered desserts lost their appeal. Younger cooks didn't have the patience for 3 separate layers that each required specific timing and temperatures. Martha Washington candy was the cherished family tradition where every grandchild and great-grandchild took a turn stirring the mixture while learning. The recipe by doing: sweetened condensed milk heated gently in a heavy saucepan with butter and vanilla. Powdered sugar added gradually while stirring constantly. The mixture thickened as more sugar went in. Shredded coconut and chopped pecans or walnuts folded through when the mixture became too stiff to stir easily. The candy mixture turned out onto wax paper and shaped into a long log while still warm. The log wrapped tight in the wax paper and chilled overnight in the refrigerator until firm enough to slice. The next day the log unwrapped and cut into half-inch rounds. Each round rolled into a ball between palms, then flattened slightly. The shaped pieces went back into the refrigerator to firm up again. Chocolate melting wafers or chocolate bark melted in a double boiler until completely smooth. Each candy piece dipped into the melted chocolate using a fork. The excess chocolate dripped off before placing the coated candy on fresh wax paper. The chocolate set at room temperature, creating a thin shell around the coconut pecan center. The inside stayed soft and creamy. The outside provided a satisfying chocolate snap. Martha Washington candy represented more than just a recipe. It represented family time together in the kitchen, passing down skills and creating memories. The candy disappeared when buying chocolate-covered candies became easier than making them. The family tradition of everyone stirring stopped when convenience replaced connection. Soft buttermilk sugar cookies were the gathering essential that appeared at every family celebration with a memory of grandmother and these. Cookies went together inseparably. Butter creamed with sugar until light and fluffy, taking at least 5 minutes by hand. 1 egg beaten in thoroughly. Buttermilk and vanilla added next. The mixture looked slightly curdled, but that was normal. Flour mixed with baking powder, baking soda, and salt sifted together. The dry ingredients stirred into the wet mixture, creating a soft, sticky dough. The dough chilled for at least 2 hours until firm enough to handle. Small portions rolled out on a floured surface to about a 1/4 inch thick. Cookie cutters pressed straight down without twisting. The cutouts transferred carefully to ungreased cookie sheets. They baked just until the edges barely turned golden. Overbaking made them crispy instead of soft. The cookies cooled on the sheets for 5 minutes before moving to racks. They stayed soft and cake-like even the next day. The buttermilk tang balanced the sweetness perfectly. Some families frosted them with simple powdered sugar icing. Others left them plain. Either way, they tasted like childhood and safety and being loved. The cookies appeared at birthdays, holidays, funerals, and random Tuesday afternoons when someone needed comfort. Soft buttermilk sugar cookies disappeared when slice and bake became the standard and rolling out dough felt like too much work. The soft texture got replaced with crispy store-bought versions. The buttermilk tang disappeared completely. Nobody made cookies that tasted like memories anymore. Sugar cream pie was the Indiana heirloom born from necessity when chickens weren't laying and fruit trees stood bare, but dessert was still expected on the table. An unbaked pie shell waited in a pie plate. Heavy cream measured into a bowl. White sugar and a little flour whisked together, then stirred into the cream. Vanilla extract added for flavor. A small amount of butter cut into tiny pieces scattered across the bottom of the pie shell. The cream mixture poured over the butter, filling the shell about 3/4 full. Fresh nutmeg grated over the top, creating small brown specks across the white surface. The pie baked in a moderate oven for about an hour. The filling puffed up, then settled as it cooled. A delicate skin formed on top while the inside stayed silky and pudding-like. The flour thickened the filling just enough to slice cleanly, but it never set firm like custard. The contrast between the flaky crust and creamy filling made every bite perfect. The simplicity was the point. Flour, sugar, cream, butter, vanilla, nutmeg. 6 ingredients that turned into something that tasted like pure luxury. Sugar cream pie survived the Depression because families could make it when they had nothing else. Her grandfather claimed this pie sustained him through lean years. We never felt poor when sugar cream pie cooled on the windowsill, he always said. The pie disappeared when buying fancy desserts became affordable. The simple pantry pie seemed too plain compared to chocolate and fruit options. Simplicity stopped being a virtue. 15 family treasures revealed. 7-layer cookies cut into diamonds. Strawberry pretzel salad with 3 perfect layers. Martha Washington candy where every child stirred. Soft buttermilk sugar cookies at every gathering. Sugar cream pie from 6 simple ingredients. 15 more heirloom secrets ahead. These recipes are leaving fast. Chocolate and coconut cream torte was the grandmother recipe she passed down years ago with the warning to make sure the chocolate layer chilled properly before adding the coconut or everything would sink into it and look terrible. Graham cracker crust pressed into the bottom of a 9x13 pan and baked until it smelled toasty. The crust cooled completely. Cream cheese beat until smooth with powdered sugar and vanilla. Half of a large container of Cool Whip folded through, creating a white fluffy layer. This mixture spread over the cooled crust. Chocolate pudding made from a mix following package directions but using slightly less milk for a thicker consistency. The chocolate pudding cooled until no longer warm, then spread carefully over the cream cheese layer. The chocolate layer had to chill for at least 2 hours until completely set before the final layer went on. Sweetened flaked coconut mixed with the remaining Cool Whip. This coconut mixture spread over the firm chocolate, creating a white fluffy top layer dotted with coconut shreds. The whole torte chilled for several more hours or overnight before serving. When cut, it showed 4 distinct layers. Graham crust on bottom, white cream cheese layer, dark chocolate layer, white coconut layer on top. Each layer stayed separate with clean lines between them. The chocolate provided richness. The coconut added texture and tropical flavor. The cream cheese balanced everything with tangy smoothness. Chocolate and coconut cream torte disappeared when making pudding from scratch, and whipping cream seemed like too much effort. Buying individual dessert cups became easier than layering a torte. Banana brownies were the Grandma Schleint's secret that came out any time ripe bananas sat on the counter turning brown and nobody wanted to eat them plain anymore. Butter melted in a saucepan, then removed from heat. Cocoa powder stirred into the hot butter until smooth and glossy. Sugar added next, along with 2 eggs beaten lightly. Vanilla extract and a pinch of salt mixed through. 2 very ripe bananas mashed until almost liquid, then stirred into the chocolate mixture. The bananas had to be brown spotted and soft or they wouldn't mash properly, and the flavor stayed bland. Flour folded in just until combined. Chopped walnuts optional but recommended for texture. The batter spread into a greased 8-inch square pan. It baked for about 30 minutes until the edges pulled away slightly, but the center still looked a bit underdone. Brownies continued cooking as they cooled. Cutting them warm made them fall apart. Cutting them cold made them fudgy and perfect. The banana flavor didn't scream out. It added moisture and a subtle sweetness that made people ask what made these brownies different. Most people couldn't identify the banana. They just knew these brownies tasted better than regular ones. The texture stayed incredibly moist even on day 3. Banana brownies disappeared when box brownie mixes became the standard, and adding fruit to brownies seemed weird instead of practical. Overripe bananas got thrown away instead of transformed. The recipe that proved nothing had to go to waste got lost when waste became acceptable. Easy Peach Cobbler was the Sister Margaret miracle that baked itself while she attended to other church duties using the backwards dump and stir method that somehow tasted better than anything requiring actual skill. Butter melted in a 9 by 13 pan in the oven while it preheated. The butter had to melt completely and get hot. Flour, sugar, baking powder, and salt whisked together in a bowl. Milk stirred in creating a thin, smooth batter. The batter poured directly into the hot melted butter in the pan. "Do not stir" was written 3 times in the margin of the recipe card. Sliced peaches from a can or fresh peaches, if in season, spooned evenly over the batter. "Do not stir" underlined twice. The magic happened in the oven. The batter rose up through the peaches, creating a cake layer on the bottom and a slightly crusty layer on top. The peaches settled in the middle, surrounded by cobbler. The edges turned golden and crispy. The center stayed soft and peachy. Served warm with vanilla ice cream melting into all the cracks and valleys. The contrast between hot cobbler and cold ice cream made it perfect. Sister Margaret added a tablespoon of cornmeal to her batter for texture and sprinkled cinnamon sugar on top before baking. Those 2 small changes made her cobbler legendary at church socials. Easy Peach Cobbler disappeared when even this simple version felt like too much work. Buying individual peach cobblers from the store eliminated the magic of the backwards batter rising through the fruit. Oatmeal coconut cookies were the great-grandma treasure that came warm from her oven anytime grandchildren visited, making the whole house smell like toasted coconut and brown sugar. Butter and shortening creamed together with white and brown sugar until fluffy. 2 eggs added 1 at a time, beating well after each. Vanilla extract and a little almond extract for depth. Flour mixed with baking soda, salt, and cinnamon. The dry ingredients stirred into the creamed mixture. Old-fashioned rolled oats added next, not the quick-cooking kind. Sweetened flaked coconut folded through last. The dough came together thick and chunky. Rounded tablespoons of dough placed 2 inches apart on ungreased cookie sheets. They baked until the edges turned golden, but the centers still looked slightly underdone. The cookies finished baking on the hot sheet after coming out of the oven. They cooled to just warm before eating. The outside stayed slightly crispy. The inside stayed chewy. The oats provided hearty texture. The coconut added tropical sweetness. The combination of extracts created a flavor complexity that plain vanilla couldn't match. These cookies appeared at every family gathering, packed in old butter cookie tins lined with wax paper. They stayed fresh for days, though they rarely lasted that long. Children reached for them first. Adults took seconds when they thought nobody was watching. Oatmeal coconut cookies disappeared when coconut fell out of fashion, and oatmeal raisin became the only acceptable oatmeal cookie variation. The tropical twist got forgotten in favor of safer, more predictable flavors. Peanut butter banana icebox pie was the Aunt Myrtle no-bake masterpiece born during hot southern summers when turning on the oven felt like committing a sin against comfort. Vanilla wafers crushed fine, mixed with melted butter pressed firmly into a pie plate. The crust chilled while the filling came together. Cream cheese beat until completely smooth with no lumps. Creamy peanut butter added next and beaten until combined. Powdered sugar sifted in gradually while beating. The mixture would be very stiff. Heavy cream whipped until stiff peaks formed. The peanut butter mixture folded into the whipped cream carefully to keep it light and airy. 2 ripe bananas sliced thin, arranged in a layer over the chilled crust. Half the peanut butter filling spread over the bananas. Another layer of sliced bananas went on top. The remaining filling spread over, creating a smooth top. Some versions drizzled melted chocolate over the top before chilling. Others left it plain. The pie chilled for at least 4 hours or overnight until completely set. When sliced, it showed distinct layers. Vanilla wafer crust. Bananas. Creamy peanut butter filling. More bananas. More filling. The combination tasted like a peanut butter and banana sandwich transformed into elegant pie. Aunt Myrtle's recipe card had "Do not serve to Brother Johnson" written in faded blue ink with a note about his peanut allergy. That thoughtful warning proved church cookbooks preserved more than recipes. They preserved community care and relationships and the knowledge of who could eat what at potlucks. 20 heirloom desserts revealed. Chocolate coconut torte with layers that had to set. Banana brownies from Grandma Schlient's easy peach cobbler that baked itself. Oatmeal coconut cookies warm from the oven. Peanut butter banana icebox pie with Brother Johnson's allergy warning. 10 more family secrets ahead. Almost there. Frosted Spice cookies were the family heirloom handed down through so many generations that nobody remembered which grandmother created them first, but everyone remembered finding them in her cookie jar during every single visit without exception. Butter creamed with both white and brown sugar until light and fluffy, taking at least 5 minutes by hand with a wooden spoon. 1 egg and dark molasses added, creating a rich, dark sweet mixture that smelled like fall and winter combined. Flour mixed with baking soda, ground cinnamon, ground ginger, ground cloves, and salt. The warm spices filled the kitchen before the cookies even went near the oven. The scent alone told children something good was coming. The dry ingredients stirred into the wet mixture, creating a soft, slightly sticky dough that smelled like Christmas regardless of what month appeared on the calendar. Small portions of dough rolled into balls between palms, then rolled again in granulated sugar before placing on ungreased cookie sheets spaced 2 inches apart. They baked just until the tops cracked slightly and the edges set firm, but the centers still looked soft and pillowy. The cookies cooled on wire racks while the frosting came together in a separate bowl. Butter, powdered sugar, vanilla extract, and just enough milk to make it spreadable but not runny. The frosting had to be thick enough to stay on top without running down the sides. The frosting went on thick, while the cookies were still slightly warm, so it melted into all the cracks on top. Each cookie got completely covered in white vanilla frosting, creating a sweet, smooth coating over the spiced cookie underneath. The combination of warm spices and sweet vanilla frosting worked perfectly together, creating balance. The cookies stayed soft for days when stored in a tin with a tight-fitting lid. Frosted Spice cookies were always in her cookie jar without fail. Always. The jar never sat empty even for an hour. If the cookies ran low, she baked more immediately the same day. That perpetually full cookie jar represented welcome and abundance and home and the absolute certainty that someone cared enough to keep it filled. The jar meant you were expected. You were wanted. There would always be enough. The tradition died when buying cookies from the bakery section became easier than keeping the jar filled with homemade ones. The cookie jar itself disappeared from kitchen counters. Nobody kept one anymore. Grandma Pruitt's vinegar pie was the pioneer-era necessity that used only pantry staples to mimic the tartness of lemon pie when fresh fruit wasn't available anywhere and the root cellar was emptying fast and spring's abundance still felt months away in the frozen distance. An unbaked pie shell prepared and waiting in a pie plate. Eggs beaten hard with white sugar until thick and pale yellow and tripled in volume. Melted butter cooled slightly to warm, not hot, before whisking carefully into the beaten eggs so they wouldn't scramble. Apple cider vinegar measured very carefully and added next. Too much vinegar made the pie taste like salad dressing. Too little left it flat and one-dimensional. The exact right amount created a bright, clean tartness that tasted surprisingly similar to fresh lemon juice. A small amount of flour stirred in to help the custard filling set properly during baking. Vanilla extract and a generous grating of fresh nutmeg added for warmth and aromatic depth that made the pie more complex. The smooth mixture poured carefully into the unbaked pie shell, filling it about 3/4 full. The pie baked in a moderate oven until the custard filling puffed up dramatically and turned golden brown on top. A knife inserted near the center, but not quite in the middle, came out clean when the pie was properly done. The filling settled back down as it cooled, creating a smooth custard texture very similar to chess pie or buttermilk pie. When cut with a sharp knife, the filling sliced cleanly, showing a pale yellow interior without being rubbery or tough. The vinegar's acidity cut straight through the sweetness, creating perfect balance that kept you taking another bite. The crust stayed flaky and buttery. The filling stayed silky smooth. People who didn't know about the secret vinegar ingredient guessed lemon every single time with complete confidence. Her great-grandmother's yellowed recipe card had the word good written in the corner in faded pencil with 3 heavy underlines for emphasis. She made this pie during the long winter months when variety was impossible and creativity was absolutely mandatory for survival. Vinegar pie represented the brilliant ingenuity of rural cooks who refused to let seasonal limitations or poverty define what they could create and serve. The pie disappeared completely when fresh lemons became available in stores year-round and making do with substitutions stopped being necessary. Nobody needed vinegar pie when real lemon meringue sat possible. Old-fashioned shoefly pie was the Pennsylvania Dutch breakfast tradition that Father's Mennonite grandmother made every single Saturday morning, without fail serving it warm with strong black coffee after farm chores finished as the original coffee cake long before coffee cake meant streusel. An unbaked pie shell sat prepared and ready in a deep pie plate. Dark molasses mixed thoroughly with boiling water, creating a thin, dark, sweet liquid that smelled rich and slightly bitter. Baking soda stirred vigorously into the hot molasses mixture, causing it to foam up dramatically before subsiding. 1 egg beaten separately, then added carefully to the molasses mixture once the aggressive foaming had completely stopped. This wet mixture set aside to cool slightly while the crumb topping came together in a separate bowl. All-purpose flour mixed with packed brown sugar, ground cinnamon, and a good pinch of salt, creating a sweet-spiced base. Cold butter cut into small pieces, then worked into the dry ingredients with a pastry cutter or 2 knives until the mixture resembled very coarse crumbs with some pieces the size of peas. The crumb mixture divided carefully into 3 equal portions. 1/3 of the crumbs went into the bottom of the unbaked pie shell and spread evenly. Half of the molasses mixture poured very carefully over the first crumb layer. Another 1/3 of the crumbs scattered evenly on top of the molasses. The remaining molasses mixture poured over the second crumb layer. The final 1/3 of crumbs topped everything, creating the signature crumb top. The pie baked in a moderate oven until the dark filling bubbled up visibly through the crumbs in the center and the crumb top turned deep golden brown. As the pie cooled on a wire rack, the molasses filling sank gradually back down, creating 3 completely distinct textured layers. The top layer stayed cakey and crumbly. The middle layer turned gooey and sticky from molasses. The bottom layer ended up somewhere between cake and soft custard. The robust, deep molasses flavor stood up beautifully to strong black coffee without being overwhelmed. The name supposedly came from bakers having to actively shoo hungry flies away from the intensely sweet pie as it cooled on windowsills. Shoefly pie disappeared almost completely outside tight-knit Pennsylvania Dutch communities when molasses became less common in modern kitchens and that strong distinctive. Flavor seemed too intense for palates accustomed to lighter, refined sugars. Milder, sweeter pies took over breakfast tables. Zucchini cupcakes were the irresistible grandmother recipe specifically requested after trying them just once at her house where absolutely nobody could. Believed that vegetables were hiding inside something that tasted so incredibly good and stayed so remarkably moist even days later. Fresh zucchini grated very fine on a box grater without bothering to peel it first because the green skin added color and nutrients. The moisture naturally present in the zucchini would release slowly during baking, keeping everything tender. All-purpose flour mixed thoroughly with baking soda, baking powder, ground cinnamon, ground nutmeg, and salt, creating a warmly spiced base that smelled like autumn. Vegetable oil beat together with large eggs and both granulated white sugar and packed brown sugar until everything combined well and looked smooth. Pure vanilla extract added for depth and sweetness. The dry spiced ingredients stirred carefully into the wet oil mixture, alternating with additions of the finely grated zucchini until everything incorporated evenly. The thick batter came together beautifully studded throughout with fine green flecks of zucchini that would practically disappear during baking. Chopped walnuts were completely optional but absolutely traditional in the original family recipe. The thick vegetable-laden batter divided evenly into paper-lined muffin tins, filling each cup about 2/3 full to allow room for rising. They baked in a moderate oven until a wooden toothpick inserted in the center came out completely clean, and the rounded tops sprang back immediately when pressed lightly with a fingertip. The fragrant cupcakes cooled completely on wire racks before any frosting went on. Rich caramel frosting made completely from scratch, never from a jar. Butter and packed brown sugar cooked together in a saucepan until bubbly and fragrant. Heavy cream added carefully off the heat so it wouldn't bubble over. Powdered sugar beaten in gradually until the frosting reached a smooth, spreadable consistency. The still warm caramel frosting spread generously over each completely cooled cupcake while the frosting remained soft and pourable. The frosting set firmly as it cooled, creating a glossy golden caramel coating. The finished cupcakes stayed incredibly moist for days because of the moisture from the zucchini. They tasted exactly like perfectly spiced cake with an exceptionally tender crumb. Nobody could ever taste the vegetable hiding inside. They only knew these particular cupcakes somehow tasted significantly better than any others they'd tried. Zucchini cupcakes disappeared when sneaking vegetables into desserts became associated with tricking picky children instead of representing practical Depression-era baking wisdom. Abundant garden zucchini got grilled or sadly thrown away instead. Honey lime almond cookies were the distinctively flavored buttery treasure passed down carefully through decades where this particular recipe kept. Families feeling genuinely connected across many miles and passing years through deeply shared memories of that unmistakable bright flavor. Butter creamed thoroughly with granulated white sugar until light and fluffy, taking several minutes of sustained beating. Honey added next along with the finely grated zest of 2 fresh limes, creating an unusual flavor combination that somehow worked beautifully together despite seeming odd on paper. 1 large egg beaten through until completely incorporated. Freshly squeezed lime juice added along with pure vanilla extract, creating a bright citrus base. All-purpose flour mixed with very finely ground almond flour, baking powder, and salt in a separate bowl. The almond flour absolutely had to be ground extremely fine, almost to powder, or the finished cookie texture would stay unpleasantly grainy instead of tender. The combined dry ingredients stirred gradually into the wet butter mixture, creating a soft, slightly sticky dough that smelled wonderful. The dough wrapped tightly and chilled in the refrigerator for at least 1 full hour until firm enough to handle easily without sticking to everything. Small portions of chilled dough rolled gently into smooth balls between palms, then pressed flat between hands to about 1/2-inch thickness. Each flattened cookie pressed firmly with the tines of a fork dipped in flour, creating the traditional crosshatch pattern on top. The shaped cookies transferred carefully to ungreased baking sheets. They baked in a moderate oven just until the edges turned light golden, but the centers stayed relatively pale. The cookies finished their cooking process on the hot baking sheet after removal from the oven. When completely cooled, the cookies developed a wonderfully tender buttery texture that practically melted on the tongue. The lime provided distinctively bright, fresh citrus flavor. The honey added gentle floral sweetness and moisture. The finely ground almonds gave subtle nutty depth and richness. Every single element worked together harmoniously, creating something far more interesting and complex than anyone expected from what appeared to be a simple butter cookie. These particular cookies traveled exceptionally well without breaking and kept fresh for many days when stored properly, making them absolutely perfect for care packages and Holiday gift boxes sent across distances. Honey lime almond cookies disappeared gradually when unusual, unexpected flavor combinations seemed too risky for most home bakers. Plain, predictable vanilla and chocolate became the only safe, acceptable choices. The sophisticated lime-honey almond flavor trio got completely forgotten in favor of flavors requiring no explanation or acquired taste. 25 heirloom desserts revealed. Frosted spice cookies always filling her jar. Vinegar pie tasting exactly like lemon. Shoefly pie served with strong coffee every Saturday. Zucchini cupcakes hiding vegetables nobody detected. Honey lime almond cookies connecting families across distances. 5 final treasures left. The rarest ones come next. Grossmutter's peppernuts were the traditional German anise cookies she baked in enormous batches weeks before Christmas arrived, storing them carefully in airtight tins until the big celebration day, when the whole house already smelled unmistakably like the holiday season was about to begin from school children coming home too. That distinctive licorice scent filling every room. Butter and vegetable shortening creamed together thoroughly with both granulated white sugar and packed brown sugar until very light and fluffy. Dark corn syrup and dark molasses added next, creating an intensely thick sweet base with deep flavor. 3 large eggs beaten in carefully one at a time, beating well after each addition. Anise extract added very generously because this was the absolute signature defining flavor of authentic peppernuts. Too little extract made them taste bland and disappointing. The precisely right amount made them taste distinctively like black licorice and Christmas and childhood all combined. All-purpose flour mixed with baking soda, ground cinnamon, ground cloves, ground nutmeg, and finely ground white pepper in a very large bowl. The white pepper provided subtle, pleasant heat that perfectly balanced the intense sweetness. The combined dry ingredients stirred gradually into the wet mixture, creating an extremely stiff dough that required real arm strength. The completed dough wrapped tightly and chilled overnight in the refrigerator to firm up completely. Small, manageable portions of the firm, chilled dough rolled on a floured surface into long ropes about ½ an inch thick. The ropes cut crosswise with a sharp knife into tiny 1/4 inch pieces, creating hundreds of small round cookies. The tiny pieces placed on ungreased baking sheets. They baked until completely firm throughout and slightly darkened in color. The finished cookies stayed rock hard when first baked, but gradually softened beautifully after weeks of proper storage. The intense anise flavor actually intensified significantly, with age becoming even more pronounced. Storing the hard cookies with an apple slice or piece of fresh bread helped speed the softening process considerably. These particular cookies were specifically meant to age for weeks. They genuinely tasted significantly better after 2 full weeks of storage than they ever did fresh from the oven. Grossmutter made massive batches in November specifically for December eating. The mandatory waiting period was an essential part of the family tradition, not an inconvenience. Peppernuts disappeared almost completely when the strong, distinctive anise flavor fell dramatically out of popular favor. Younger generations immediately associated that particular taste with liquid medicine, not cookies or candy. The extended patience required for properly aging them felt completely unreasonable when fresh, soft cookies from grocery stores were available immediately. Pinwheel mints were the eye-catching grandmother and mother creation that successfully replaced ordinary store-bought mints at family parties. We're impressed. Guests always asked repeatedly how that pretty spiral pattern happened and could they please have the recipe written down. Cream cheese softened completely to room temperature, beat with an electric mixer until absolutely smooth with no lumps remaining. Butter added next and beaten together until the mixture became very light and fluffy. Powdered sugar sifted carefully to remove any lumps, then added gradually while beating continuously until the thick mixture resembled stiff frosting. Peppermint extract added carefully to taste, starting with less and adding more as needed. The completed mixture divided exactly in half into two separate bowls. One half stayed pure white without any additions. The other half colored with just a few drops of food coloring until the desired shade was reached. Pink worked beautifully for wedding showers and receptions. Green looked perfect for Christmas gatherings. Red suited Valentine's Day celebrations. The specific color chosen depended entirely on the particular occasion being celebrated. Each separate portion rolled out carefully between two sheets of wax paper into matching rectangles about a 1/4 inch thick. The colored layer placed precisely on top of the white layer. Both layers rolled together tightly into a compact log, starting from the long side and peeling away the wax paper as you rolled. The completed log wrapped snugly in fresh wax paper and chilled in the refrigerator until very firm throughout. When ready to serve at the party, the firm log unwrapped carefully and sliced with a sharp knife into thin rounds about a 1/4 inch thick. Each individual slice showed a perfect spiral of white and colored mint swirled together beautifully. The distinctive pinwheel pattern came directly from rolling the two contrasting layers together into a log. The finished mints arranged attractively on serving plates, looking incredibly decorative and elegant. Grandma's star cookies were the husband's grandmother's unwavering tradition, made exclusively with one single star-shaped cookie cutter, never any other shape whatsoever, because stars were special and meaningful and magical, while other shapes were just ordinary cookies without significance. Butter creamed with granulated white sugar until very light in color and fluffy in texture. One large egg added along with both vanilla extract and almond extract beaten in thoroughly. The almond extract was absolutely mandatory, not optional. That single ingredient made these particular cookies taste distinctly different from every other sugar cookie recipe in existence. All-purpose flour mixed with baking powder and salt in a separate bowl. The dry ingredients stirred gradually into the creamed butter mixture, creating a soft, slightly sticky dough. The completed dough wrapped tightly and chilled for at least 2 full hours until firm enough to roll out cleanly without sticking to everything. Small portions of chilled dough rolled out on a generously floured surface to about a 1/4 inch thick. The treasured star cookie cutter pressed straight down, firmly making perfect 5-pointed stars. Only stars were permitted. Any other shapes were strictly absolutely forbidden according to unbreakable family law. The grandmother would actually become upset if anyone suggested using different shapes. The cut star shapes transferred carefully to ungreased cookie sheets spaced about 1 inch apart. They baked in a moderate oven just until the edges barely started to turn the palest golden color. Overbaking even slightly made them unacceptably crispy instead of properly tender. Correct baking kept them wonderfully tender with a texture that almost melted. The baked cookies cooled completely on wire racks before any decorating began. Royal icing made from powdered sugar, egg whites, and fresh lemon juice beaten until thick and smooth. Some stars outlined carefully and flooded with pure white icing. Others stayed completely plain without any decoration. Either way, they tasted like pure butter and almond with an exceptionally tender crumb that practically melted on the tongue. Cottage pudding was the confusingly named vintage dessert that contained absolutely no actual pudding whatsoever, but instead consisted of simple, plain vanilla. Butter cake served steaming warm with generous amounts of sweet sauce poured liberally over the top until the sturdy cake soaked it up completely like a sponge. Butter creamed with granulated white sugar until light and fluffy. Large eggs added one at a time, beating well after each addition. Pure vanilla extract added for depth of flavor. All-purpose flour mixed with baking powder and salt. The dry ingredients added alternately with whole milk, creating a thick, smooth batter. The batter poured into a well-greased square baking pan. It baked until golden brown, and a wooden toothpick inserted in the center came out completely clean. The cake had to be dense and sturdy enough structurally to hold substantial amounts of liquid sauce without falling apart into mush. While the cake baked, the sauce came together on the stovetop. Vanilla sauce, made from granulated sugar, cornstarch, butter, boiling water, and vanilla extract cooked together until thick and glossy clear. Or lemon sauce made exactly the same way, but with fresh lemon juice replacing the vanilla extract. Or rich chocolate sauce for dedicated chocolate lovers. Mrs. Franklin's handwritten recipe specifically insisted on serving it warm enough to instantly melt a small pat of butter placed on top. The still warm cake cut into generous squares. Each square placed carefully in an individual serving bowl. The hot sauce poured over very generously until the cake was swimming. The sturdy cake absorbed the sauce, becoming completely saturated with intense flavor and sweetness. The texture transformed entirely from regular cake into something unique between cake and actual pudding. Every single bite was moist and sweet and satisfying. Cottage pudding represented a specific time when simple basic ingredients and clever preparation techniques created genuinely memorable treats without requiring fancy equipment. Puff pastry apple dumplings were the heavenly creations Grandma affectionately called angel pillows, where Aunt Betty made them religiously every autumn, when Macintosh apples ripened perfectly and the whole church congregation mysteriously showed up at her doorstep hoping for a taste. There was something about that time of year, the air turning sharp, the leaves going gold, the kitchen window fogged up from the oven heat, that made those dumplings feel like the whole season had been wrapped up and tied with a bow. Tart firm baking apples peeled carefully and cored completely, leaving the apples whole and intact. Store-bought frozen puff pastry thawed according to package directions until pliable but still cold. Each sheet rolled very slightly, just enough to smooth out the visible creases. The pastry cut into large squares big enough to wrap completely around each whole apple. Each prepared apple placed in the exact center of a pastry square. Brown sugar mixed with ground cinnamon and a generous pat of cold butter packed firmly into the hollow center where the core used to be. The 4 pastry corners brought up carefully and pressed together firmly at the top, wrapping the apple completely like a precious gift. All the seams pressed firmly to seal tightly so nothing escaped during baking. Each completed dumpling placed carefully in a well-buttered baking dish with sides high enough to hold the sauce. More butter, brown sugar, and cinnamon mixed with a small amount of water created a sweet syrup. The syrup poured carefully around all the dumplings in the pan, not over them, so the pastry on top stayed dry enough to puff and blister and turn golden the way puff pastry was meant to. They baked in a hot oven until the pastry turned deeply golden and incredibly flaky, and the apples inside became perfectly tender when pierced with a knife. The brown sugar mixture caramelized around the edges, creating a sticky sweet sauce that pooled deliciously at the bottom of the pan, thick and dark and smelling like a county. 30 heirloom desserts, 30 grandmothers who never measured twice but always got it right. 30 recipes that lived on index cards and in muscle memory and in the hands of women who learned by standing next to someone who loved them. The 7 pound cake she only revealed at reunions. The vinegar pie that fooled everyone into thinking it was lemon. The frosted spice cookies that were always in the jar. Always. The angel pillows Aunt Betty wrapped one at a time every single autumn until she stopped. These weren't just desserts. They were how families stayed connected across kitchens and decades and distance. And they are leaving, faster than anyone realizes. The recipe cards are yellowing. The tins are empty. The women who kept the jars full are gone. But you just watched all 30. That means something. If your grandmother made one of these, drop her name in the comments right now. Tell us what she made. Tell us what her kitchen smelled like. Because that story deserves to live longer than a recipe card. Save this video, share it with someone who still remembers, and if you want every single recipe written out with full instructions, they are pinned in the comments waiting for you.